Hey everybody, Syntax77 here, and today I want to share with you my stealth backpacking gear list. This here pack has everything I need to go backpacking and spend a night in the woods or wherever really. And as you can see, it's a very small form factor. It's actually a 21-liter pack, and believe it or not, it only weighs a little under 9 pounds, just a hair under 9 pounds. We'll call it 9. And it's low volume, obviously, because I jammed it all into a 21-liter pack. Now, the reason that I did this, that I got inspired to do this, just for fun, basically, a key component in here is the backpack, and for me, that is one of my inspirations to do this. Now, you can use whatever 21-liter or 20-ish liter backpack that you want. In my case, this one's pretty fancy. It might be a little overkill for a lot of you out there, but this is by a company called Go Ruck, and it is the GR1. Looks pretty nondescript, just a regular black pack, but there's more to it than meets the eye, and that right there is why I had the inspiration to do this, because this here actually is super rugged. This thing's built like a tank. It's got a lot more features than you would expect, and well, we'll get into all that as we go, and I'll do a separate review video on this pack at some point. It was sent to me for testing, and I figured this would be a great way to do it. Now, stealth camping can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I would say for the most part, we can all agree it means low impact, low visibility to others. You're going into the woods, you're setting up camp. You're definitely not at an established campsite, right? You're somewhere out there in the woods, you pop off the trail and you set up, and most likely nobody else even knows you're there. In my case, I took it one step further. I wanted to create a system where when you walk out of that car or away from that trailhead, you look like just a regular old day packer, just somebody out for a stroll, but you actually have all the tools and gear you need to spend a night in the woods. Why would you want to do that? Again, it's just for fun. I don't know. Everybody has their own reasons out there. Now, some people consider stealth camping as a term for illegally camping or camping somewhere you shouldn't go. That's not what I'm advising on this video. I'm not encouraging people to do that. For me, I'm just doing this for fun. And honestly, when you go out, I kind of like when I walk around in the woods and maybe somebody's camping 300 yards away or 100 yards away when I'm going down the trail and I don't even know they're there. I think it kind of adds to everybody's immersive experience when out in the woods. So it's not necessarily a bad thing or an illegal thing. So whatever your needs are, maybe this is just for entertainment purposes, you're a backpacking nerd and you just want to watch this gear list for a little bit of fun, that's cool too. As you can tell from the timestamp down there below, this is not a short video. We do long form videos around here. We're just going to have fun, do a little conversation, go through this pack, and we'll talk about the gear in here. Sounds fun to me. If that's not your cup of tea, maybe you got a little too much Snapchat on the brain, no worries. There's plenty of suggestive videos over here that are a lot shorter. You won't hurt my feelings. But those of you who are still with me, let's dive right into it. So first things first, I did mention the pack. Now, this guy is not cheap. This is a hand-built rugged backpack. The company is actually run by someone who is SF or Special Forces, and he knows his stuff. He decided to create his own gear company and make stuff that is rugged and up to the snuff of those kinds of standards. Actually, I have a friend in SF that I reached out to and said, have you ever heard of this brand? And he actually knows somebody kind of higher up in the company there who's SF as well. So I do trust this brand, but again, you don't need to go that far. You could just get a regular old Jansport. You'll definitely blend in doing that, right? So anyway, that's the pack. I have a gear list. There is a link right at the top of the video description. I made it on lighterpack.com. You can click that list, you can print it yourself or just kind of peruse it, and you're going to get detailed weights, names, and descriptions for all the gear I talk about. So if you want to play along at home, you can do that. And I've also built into it, if you open it up on your computer, for all the various products here and gear items, there are hyperlinks that can bring you to the product page for that piece of gear, and you can get more specific details on it just to make it a little easier for you if you're interested in kind of putting together a kit like this yourself. And as you can see on that list, the base weight is 8.88 pounds. And I have 3.5 pounds of clothing. Seems like a lot, but it does add up. Now the clothing is listed there, but again, not in the base weight. I'm not going to get into clothing. I usually do not do that on these gear list videos because I have a separate video on clothing. That'll make this video a little more streamlined. So you can check that out. In fact, up here is a playlist on that little I button, and that is a playlist of all my various gear list videos over the years. Perhaps stealth camping is not for you. In the case of this system here, in order to get it done, I pulled out all the stops. I've amassed a lot of gear over the years, and I did what I had to with all of the best gear that I personally had lying around to pull off this low volume kit. That might not be for you. So in those gear list videos, there's videos that are tailored towards backpacking on a budget. I have one for under $250. There's one simply just for more traditional ultralight backpacking. That would be my 2017 ultralight backpacking gear list video. So check those out. But right now we're going to get into the stealth pack. So first things first, clip to the side here. You'll notice this does have MOLLE webbing all over it. And I wouldn't actually carry it like this. It was just to remind me to talk about it. I usually carry this in my pocket. Just a simple folding pocket knife. This is a 3-incher. It's around 3 ounces because it's pretty stout. Got a metal handle and everything. You could get a cheaper, lighter one for sure with like a plastic handle, but some sort of knife just to open up packages of food, etc. Speaking of food, I don't have that in here, and you'll notice as I go through there's not a lot of volume left in this pack. I can probably get a couple days worth of food crammed in here, especially if I go for kind of calorie dense foods, but this is pretty much a quick hit kind of thing. Only 1 or 2 nights in the woods for your stealth camp. If you want to go for longer than that and still be stealth, maybe push up into the higher 20-liter packs, maybe to 30s, but at a certain point you're going to get to the point where you look like an overnight backpacker, and that would kind of fail the criteria of what I'm trying to pull off for fun here. So next up, I have a zipper on the outside of the pack right here. I'm going to open up, and in here I tried to pack this kind of smart. So on the outside is stuff that I'm going to want to reach in and grab when I take a break on the trail, and I want to have accessible throughout the day before I get to camp. So first things first, water treatment. This right here is a SteriPen Ultralight. It's 2.5 ounces. I did a separate video on it, so I won't go too deep, but basically it uses UV rays to sterilize the water. I chose this because it is compact and simple to use. A lot of this is not necessarily the lightest gear, but it's low volume gear. Although, because I had so little space, that's how we still ended up under 9 pounds. Now, an alternative to this would be my other favorite go-to, the Katadyn B free water filter. And for stealth camping, this would be great too, because it's just enough water for one person. You can drink right out of it, and it's about half the price of the SteriPen, but it is a little bulkier. So because I had it at my disposal, I went with the SteriPen. Now you might be wondering, water, hydration, right? Where did I fit that on this pack? Well, this pack does have the ability to take a hydration bladder, okay? There's a lot of kind of military purposes and on-the-go purposes built into this pack. It's very rugged. It actually can hold 400 pounds, which is insane. The reason for that is because it has spots, multiple spots in there to put ruck plates, which are basically very heavy weights that you can use to train and get your stamina up. But in our case, we're just going to use those spots to store gear. I am not carrying a hydration pouch. It's just a little extra bulk and stuff to mess with, so I'm not doing that, even though it does have the capability and the ports for that. In my case, I went with a water bottle, and because of the MOLLE webbing on here, I'm able to attach this here water bottle holder. Normally I only use this in winter because it insulates and keeps my water from freezing. In my case, it's because I ran out of space and I need somewhere to put this. So I can actually very simply attach this to the webbing, and I'm good to go. And I did test that out. It works. I actually had to put it upside down to keep it flush so that it's not hitting the ground, but it does the job. The pack's light enough. It's easy to get off. I just sling it off. I grab my water bottle out. I can take a drink, and then my SteriPen fits right down in there just fine. So 1 liter water bottle right here, and this is like a Nalgene style, but it's actually from 40 below. This guy's a little more flexible for cold temps. This is a warm weather kit though. Just want to point that out. I do not have the gear for really cold temps, but I brought this anyway because it's around 4-ish ounces instead of a regular Nalgene, which is like 6. So might as well save the weight if you can. So that's that. And by the way, I will be doing a companion video where I go out and take this on an actual trip, and I'm going to film everything. So stay tuned for that. Or if you're watching this at a later date, there's going to be a link right up here, and you can see me actually take the trip where I have this kitted out on the backpack. So that is water. We got that out of the way. What else do I have in here? Okay, this is just a simple cloth. Looks like a paper towel, but it's a little more rugged. You could bring a scrap piece of t-shirt, handkerchief, whatever. Because I'm using the SteriPen system, it's going to make that water safe to drink, but it's not necessarily going to filter out like bits of leaves or sediment and stuff. Most of the places I go, I can find some pretty decent water, so it's not the end of the world. But if I pour it through this cloth into the Nalgene, then it'll just take some of that stuff out of the water. This is a simple compass. It's by Brunton. And I carry this all the time, despite any electronics, whatever. Regular, old, classic compass. Bring it with you. It's cheap. It's light. It's like an ounce. I got it right there. outside of my pack. This is on the outside because if I stop and take a break to eat, I'm going to want to have this accessible pretty quickly. And it's just a simple spork, long-handled, so I can get down in those dehydrated backpacking meals. You could also just use a regular old plastic fork, but since I have this, it's pretty convenient, and I like that long handle. And that there wipes out the outside pocket. That's all I have. Just basically water gear and my utensil. As I open up the pack here, this does open all the way up, kind of field medical style, flat opens all the way up. That makes it very easy and convenient to pack, or when you're at camp, you can really get in at it and see all your gear. See how I have it laid out there? And then I also have two pockets, a top and a bottom. Now the top obviously is more accessible when I don't fully open the pack, so I have gear up there that I can get to more quickly. So let's do that first. I'm just gonna reach in and grab stuff out of that top pouch. Some of this stuff is on my other gear list videos, so if I don't go into super detail, you can always get more detail on my other gear list videos. This is the same first aid kit that I always bring. It's very simple. That is up to you, depending on how deep into the woods, how far away from civilization you're getting, what your risk tolerance is, stuff like that. For me, I just carry, we'll go real quick, some moleskin for blister protection, some sterile wipes, an assortment of Band-Aids, a patch kit for my tarp that we'll see later, ibuprofen, Benadryl in case you get bit by something weird or stung, or, well, you just have trouble sleeping. A sewing kit, if you want to call it that. It's just a needle, some black thread wrapped around a little piece of cardboard, just in case I want to mend something and it weighs virtually nothing. A backup spoon, fast food spoon, like I mentioned earlier. You don't want to lose your spoon, that sucks. Speaking of things that you don't want to lose, a backup water bottle cap, but in this case I'm using the Nalgene, so that's kind of useless. A lot of times I use a disposable water bottle, so that's why that's here. If you lose your bottle cap, that's no good. So I just keep it in there no matter what, because when I grab this kit, I know it has everything I need for whatever trip. Small tea candle could be some emergency lighting or fire starter. Small thing of super glue for mending or healing cuts. And two tubes, basically straws that are heat sealed with a lighter, and they have Neosporin in them. That's my first aid. I keep that in that top pouch so that it is readily accessible to me. Toiletries, right? In my case, very simple. Travel toothbrush. I wear contacts, so my contact lens holder, spare contacts, and a tiny little bottle. You can get these at like scientific stores, or on Dutchware.com is where I got mine. And they're just little various water bottles that I got, or I should say liquid bottles that I got. This one's like a 10 mil or 5 mil. It just has a little bit of saline in it. I'm not going to need much. A lot of times I sleep with them in, but just in case they're bothering me. And travel toothpaste. That is all my toiletries. Sometimes I will carry a little chapstick tube with some deodorant in it. You just melt it in the microwave and pour it into the chapstick tube that's empty, and you got yourself a mini deodorant. That's an option too. But if you're solo hiking, whatever. Toilet paper, that's important, right? Little bag of toilet paper, no need to bring a whole roll. I definitely couldn't in this setup. My headlamp, I have that readily accessible up top. In this case, it's a Ultralight H05 active. I love this light. It's cheap, like 15 bucks, and it runs for, I forget the exact specs, but a lot of hours on low, and it has high feature as well if I really need to track something down, but for the most part I use low. And actually what I like about this that isn't even on a lot of the higher end Ultralights for whatever reason is the red lights. It has two red LEDs on each side that run like for a crazy amount of time, and they don't even list the run time on the specs. But compared to how long low is, the red will run a ton of time, and that's right off of some AAA batteries. I like the red light because once your eyes adjust and you're at camp and it's dark, it's plenty of light for reading stuff, doing chores, and you won't blow out your night vision, and your battery's going to last a lot longer. Fire starting kit. And some spare foil, and that's just for trips sometimes where we cook. We might put foil on a rock and do something fancy. It's just always in there. I'm probably not going to have a fire on this trip because it's stealth camping. I don't really want attention, and you might be somewhere where you can't have fires anyway. So nonetheless, I carry this all the time. A little box of matches, a lighter, a small one. There's a little fire starter in here. This one is actually a store-bought fire starter called Wet Fire. It works pretty well, but really you can make your own in various ways, whether it's cotton balls with Vaseline or just some dryer lint with candle wax. There's all kinds of creative ways to have a fire starter with you. That's about it for in here. Next up, some baby wipes. I like to take baby wipes, cut them in half so they have a little more flexibility, because usually I don't need that much. I'm just maybe, washing up a spot that's dirty or kind of cleaning up before bed, whatever. So I just take a few and put it in a bag, and they're cut in half. And that's the end of that top pouch. So let's move down to the bottom pouch, and then we'll get into the major contents of the pack. So bottom pouch here, it's more of a mesh, and that's nice because you can see what's in there. I should also mention, now that I'm looking at the mesh, I want to point something important out. This pack, I said it was rugged, and it seriously is. It's made out of 1000D nylon. To put that in perspective, a typical like compressible down jacket, like camping jacket, the material on that is 15D. This is 1000. Because of that, it's not only rugged, but in the manufacturer's own words, it is heavily water resistant, aka rainproof. So I am comfortable, at least because I'm testing this, I'm going to go ahead and go no pack cover. So it's not on my gear list. But if you're using a different pack, most likely you would not have that thick of a material. You would not trust it for rain. You have like a JanSport pack or something like that, then just carry a pack cover. My suggestion is the Dutchware Argon Sill pack cover. It is under 2 ounces. You can get it in a variety of prints. Slips right over easily, especially on a small pack like this, and it's going to rainproof your pack. And I will mention items like this that are mentioned but not actually on the gear list, I will put at the bottom of the video description in the additional items area, so you can click on those links and get more info. But back to the mesh pocket. Another one of those little bottles I was talking about. I put some sunscreen in it so it's even smaller and lighter than a travel tube. And you don't have to keep buying those travel tubes. You can just get your regular old sunscreen and fill this up. You can do the same thing with bug spray. You can fill one of these little bottles with your favorite bug spray, like a high percentage DEET type thing, 100% DEET, something like that. In my case, I had these around. I've been experimenting with them. It's called Pickardin. It's made by Sawyer. They sent me some samples. And these are individual packets. I don't know if you can actually find these retail. I think the link in my video is for a bottle. You could squeeze into a smaller bottle. But this is nice. It goes on just like sunscreen, and it doesn't really have like a bug spray kind of smell or feel to it. And I found that it's working pretty well. So I just have a couple packets of that with me that I can put on if the bugs are a problem. Right here is my bear bag line. It's just some simple guy line with a little carabiner that I can use to throw my gear up in the air to keep critters away from it. Now, I don't have like a legit dry bag or anything. That would be too bulky and I really don't need it. So what I do for my bear bag, just a simple trash bag, a 13-gallon trash bag. You stuff it anywhere in here. It doesn't take up any space, and you can use that to haul your gear up in the air. Or if you do bring the pack cover, which a lot of you probably will because you're not using this particular pack, if you're bringing a pack cover, my favorite thing to do is just put your food items in here, kind of hobo style, cinch it up, wrap the line around it, and here's your water resistant food bag to hang in the tree overnight. Next up in the mesh pouch, just a little bottle that I fill up with hand sanitizer just to kind of clean up after doing chores or nature's call, whatever the case may be. Very simple and light, and you can refill it from a larger container. And the last item in here are my tent spikes. I want to have those quick and accessible, especially if you get caught in the rain, right? You want to set up quick. And I just happen to have this little pouch laying around. If you don't, no big deal. Just throw your tent spikes right in there. These are titanium, so they're nice and light, 0.2 ounces a piece. I have 6 of these to cover all of my different tie-out points. Some people say you can use sticks and rocks. That's true, but for 1.2 ounces, this is super quick. I don't have to fiddle around and look for improvised stakes, if you will. I just pop these in the ground. I find that worth it. That covers the mesh section. So next up, if I can tilt it without dumping it, you can see the rest of my gear there. Pretty simple. Let's roll through it. First things first, let's look at the tarp, because we were just talking about the tent spikes. This is a Hammock Gear Kuben fiber hex tarp, or nowadays I think they call it Dyneema fiber hex tarp. Remember I said I pulled out all the stops. Like the backpack, this thing is not cheap, but it's awesome and light. This is a 12 by 8.5 foot tarp. It is around 5 ounces. Yes, 5 ounces. You'll notice on the gear list, however, that it says 8.5 ounces. That's because that includes all of my lines. So I have 6 tie-out points on here. 2 in the middle to pull the sides out, and then of course the 4 corners. And then actually I have 8 tie-out points because I have the main ridge line that goes across the top, and that's an adjustable ridge line. You'll see that in my video when I do the trip. It allows me to set up and fine-tune it pretty quickly. So with all those lines, plus the tarp and the stuff sack, 8.5 ounces. Pretty impressive. It squeezes down more than this if you need it to, about like that. But for me, just fits right in the top, no problem. This does kind of remind me to mention something as I go through this gear. I've already bought this stuff and invested over the years, but there are more stealthy, if you will, options out there, especially in the case of this kuben fiber. You can get this in a camo pattern that's pretty nice. In my case, I'm such a gram weenie, and I was even more of a gram weenie back when I invested in this. The camo print was slightly heavier, not much, but slightly heavier, and it might have added to the cost a little bit. So I just got the traditional color here. It still actually is pretty nondescript from a distance. It doesn't really catch the eye that well, but if you get the camo pattern, you're really going to be nice and stealth. That definitely helps keep my weight down. I love that guy right there. All right, so speaking of clothing, I said I have the clothing worn listed on there, and that's not included in my base weight. What is included in my base weight is spare clothing, but I have virtually no spare clothing. That's my personal choice. You can do whatever you want. It kept my weight and volume down. I've done trips where I bring no spare clothing, and it's fine, especially in warm weather where it's not going to be life critical if you get wet, right? You're just going to let yourself dry. So in my case, I just have a spare pair of socks right here. At night, it's kind of comfortable sometimes to put on a nice fresh pair. If it's a little chillier, then you can have your socks on. And if it's the last day, you can hike out in fresh socks. So that's nice. Then I have a pair of underwear, just synthetic underwear. That's nice to be able to switch up too. This here is a lightweight but long sleeve shirt. This could be an alternative shirt to my t-shirt that I'm going to hike in, or it can be supplemental warmth at night or early morning. This you may or may not be able to ditch and leave out. It is included on my gear list weight, but if you know it's going to be like super warm where you're going and you're not going to have some early morning, late night lows, then you could skip this. But for me, I did include it. Now, when it gets closer to when I go on my trip, I don't even know where I'm going yet. Once I figure that out and what the weather is, then I can decide whether or not to bring this. But this is a good additional warmth. And I will mention that if you're doing a longer trip, as long as you have spare socks and underwear, right, you have 2 pairs total, you can wash these in the stream, attach them to your pack, let them dry as you go, and just alternate back and forth. But in my case, I'm probably not doing that long of a trip. Probably 2 nights once I do that trip video. This is another one that you may not have to bring. It is included on my gear list. It's only around an ounce, and it's a synthetic kind of beanie style hat, if you will. This is nice for, again, the same situation as that long sleeve shirt over there. A little supplemental warmth, especially sleeping at night. Your head is actually one of the biggest heat loss areas on your body, so if you cover that up, the rest of you will suddenly start to get warmer in most cases. So that's why I have this. Again, depending on the forecast or what you're doing, you might be able to ditch this and save an ounce and a little bit of space. And that covers the clothing in here. If you want more details on my clothing, especially what I'm going to wear in, check out the video up there that I did specifically on clothing. So now we're down to just 4 major items in here. Let's do this first. In my case, I'm using a hammock system. I love hammocks. I find they are very versatile for setting up as long as there are trees. You don't have to worry about finding even terrain. There can be sticks and rocks and whatnot all around. You're going to be good to go with a hammock. However, I'm going to show you some options for ground sleeping in a minute, and I'll put that in the additional gear at the bottom of the video description. But this right here is my hammock, and it's also my hammock suspension in here. The hammock body itself is only 10 ounces. It is a Dutchware half-wit hammock. Very minimal. Right? There it is right there. It just has a bug net that drapes over the top of your body and then kind of rests along your chest area and matches up with your top quilt, which we'll see in a minute. And that pretty much keeps all the bugs out. I've been in some really buggy situations in warm weather camping with this system, and the bugs did not bother me at all. That being said, if you're the type of person who wants to sleep with like shorts on and you want to kick your top quilt off and expose like your legs and stuff, this might not be the system for you. But for me, it's low volume, it's super light. Like I said, 10 ounces for the hammock itself, and it gets the job done. It's also in a nice olive drab color, which is cool and stealthy, right? Now, included in here, but listed separately on the gear list in terms of weight, are these whoopee hooks. I got the other one over here. Okay, whoopee hooks are just basically some very strong line, am steel to be exact, and then some tree huggers to protect the tree so you're not running rope right around it. Those are made of Kevlar. Yeah, Kevlar, the same stuff as bulletproof materials are made of. Very lightweight yet strong stuff. So 2 of these together is 3.5 ounces total for the pair, and that's going to allow me to wrap around the trees and set my hammock up. So that there is my hammock system. But for those of you out there who don't mess with hammocks, never have, whatever, you're just not into that, or maybe you're in an area with no trees, here's my option for that. Just 2 items that you would swap the hammock out for, okay? This one right here has a ground cloth, just some Tyvek. You can get this at the hardware store, although you probably have to buy a big old roll of it. In my case, I got it from Dutchware Gear because he sells it by the foot. Very convenient. So this is a 6 by 3 foot piece that I'll lay down on the ground if I were gonna ground sleep. And then for the sleeping pad, this is the lowest volume option that I personally had at my disposal. Pretty small, right? This is a very minimalist sleeping pad. It's called the Climate X-Lite. And I actually used to use this in a hammock, believe it or not, way back in the day before I got my underquilt, which you'll see in a minute. But this guy does blow up, and then he has like holes in it, right? That's what keeps the weight down. All those are designed specifically to be the various pressure points on your body. Believe it or not, when you get in this thing, you actually put it inside your sleeping bag. When you get in and you lay down, it works really well. Now, if you're a side sleeper or somebody that tosses and turns a lot, this might not work for you. For me personally, I do sleep on my side, but I still found this to be okay. But when you're laying on your back, it's perfect, gets the job done, and I believe it's only 9 ounces. So, moving on, I am using a hammock on this trip, but I will show you first the top quilt because this would work with either system. This is going to keep you warm in the ground sleeping system I just showed, or in your hammock. If you're not familiar with hammocks, there's other videos to give you the details, but the gist of it is you can't just put a sleeping bag in a hammock because the insulation works by being fluffed up and trapping air. When you lay on a sleeping bag, it's not doing anything, that insulation. So underneath of you, you're going to get what they call cold butt syndrome. You want something suspended under your hammock that isn't getting crushed by your body weight, and that's where an underquilt comes in, which we're going to see in a minute. But for ground sleeping, you'll be fine because you have that pad that I just showed you to keep your butt from getting cold. But this is the top quilt. Unlike a traditional mummy bag, this does not have a hood on it. That's why I showed you that lightweight microfleece hat over there, because I can wear that at night, and it basically keeps me just as warm as having a mummy hood wrapped around me, at least for the kind of conditions that we're going for here. And the quilt has snaps on it, so you can still snap it around you to keep it secure. Sometimes I'll just snap this top part right here and then cinch it down. It holds it kind of right on your neck, and then you use this just like a blanket when you're in the hammock. When you're on the ground, you can pull it around you and just kind of fashion it like a sleeping bag. This is only around 14 ounces, and like you saw, packs down pretty well. It could actually, both of these, squish down even more if you really need to crush them in, but in my case, it was fine. I didn't need to crush them too much. And this is made by the same company as that tarp I showed you. It's Hammock gear. I love these things. This is the Burrow 40, and good till around 40 degrees. I find I can push most of their gear around 10 degrees lower, so I'm fine with this down to 30. Then we move on to the bottom quilt, which you would not carry with the ground system I showed, but for hammock camping, for the aforementioned reasons, you're going to need some sort of underquilt, or you could put a pad, like I said, right in your hammock. In my case, I invested in one of these, again from Hammock Gear. This model is called the Phoenix, and this is a 30-degree model, which means I'd be comfortable taking it down to probably 20. This right here only is 3/4 length, they call it. They do make underquilts that go for the length of your whole body. This one goes from around here, around shoulders and neck area, down to, I'd say, around a little below the knee or so. So it does, I find, keep me plenty warm. The advantage of the 3/4 length is that it is lighter, less material, right? Now, some of you might already be going, who are familiar with hammocks, what about your feet? Don't they get cold? Well, the remedy for that typically is you just put a pad under your feet and you tuck it into your top quilt, because the top quilt still has a little foot box at the bottom, so your feet are kind of contained, and then it kind of blossoms out into like a regular blanket kind of style. You can carry something like this. This is a Dutchware folding sit pad. It's like a 1/2 ounce. This is usually plenty. It goes right underneath your feet. And on colder weather trips, I will use that. However, me personally, I have found, because I've accidentally forgot to set this up on several trips, I've slept without the pad under my feet, and I felt fine. It never bothered me at all for warmer weather trips. We're talking like down into like the 50s, even cracking the 40s. I think I've done it without a foot pad. Your results are going to vary. That's up to you. But I did not put this on my gear list because it just saved me space. For warmer weather, in my experience, I just know I'm not going to need it, so I'm not bringing it, but it will be in the additional gear list section. This does also make a great sit pad. You just bust it out, you can sit on it, put it on a log or some rocks, and make yourself a little more comfortable. But because of my 21-liter restraints, I was basically forced to pair out a lot of items, and that's one of the ones I did. So anyway, that's the underquilt. It attaches with these lines and it suspends underneath of you. That's a whole nother subject, but that's the basic gist of it. The very last item in here is actually several items, but they're all bundled together into what I call my cook kit, but I did break the weights out separate on my gear list. So let's get into it. On the outside here, holding everything together, is just a 450 milliliter pot. That is roughly less than a cup. I think it's around 14.5 ounces for those of us on the Imperial system. This is nice and lightweight. Obviously it's metal, so I can apply heat to it, no problem. This isn't really for drinking, no. Now this is where I'm getting super minimal, because normally, let me grab it, I carry a 750 milliliter pot, and I do my cooking in that. Has a little lid too. I know that most of my meals are around 16 ounces of water or less. Some of the meals are 14 ounces or 12 ounces, so I can just barely pull it off. I have done this before, so I know it'll work. I can actually use this little cup, and it's enough to heat up the water I need for my dehydrated meals, and then I can also drink coffee out of it too. That's pretty bare minimum. The choice is yours, but space was really limited, like I said, so that's where we went. And the added bonus is these are cheaper than the larger pots. So that is my cup/water heating vessel. Inside, I have this stuff sack. It came with another pot. You can find mesh stuff sacks online. I use that just to keep everything contained that you're about to see, plus it helps slip it in there. The main component is my stove. And what is this stove? It's an Esbit stove. Now, I've showed Esbit on the channel before, the little fuel cubes like this. I like these a lot for ultralight backpacking. I also normally carry my DIY stove that's just a little pellet tin, and then I have a separate windscreen, and I use these with it. But in my case, that setup, there's two reasons I went with this. First off, with that system, I use my windscreen to sit the pot on, and this cup is too small. It just won't fit on that other windscreen system, so it wasn't an option. On top of that, this actually packs down nice and flat, even though it is about an ounce heavier, which isn't that bad, than my other system. It packs down flat, so low volume, and that is a big key in this system. All it does is pop open like this. The cube, obviously not in the packaging, but it would sit right there, and then the cup goes perfectly on top and gets hit with the flame. Works pretty well. Those cubes are about an ounce a piece, and you can kind of work out with experience how many cubes to bring on a trip. Bring a couple more for safety, you're good to go. You also notice that it kind of doubles as a windscreen. You just position it in the way the wind's coming from, and you can cut it down a little bit. So that is my stove. And actually, I got this when I had to buy more fuel, and it was just a kit that came with this for only a couple bucks more. So check that out. There's a link in the description. I kind of like it. It's kind of neat, kind of clever. What else is in the bag? We're in the home stretch here. Not much to show when you have a 21 liter pack. Another lighter. Yes, a backup lighter, even though I have matches. It's small, it's super light, it's cheap. Just carry a separate lighter. I personally like to, at least. Put my fuel in here. Depending on, like I said, the length, I would take more or less than that. And a little fire striker. Now for lighting Esbit, this doesn't actually work, but I always have this in my kit, and it's super light. It's like an ounce or something like that. You could use this survival purposes to get a fire starter going, like that wet fire I showed you. I could shave that into little shavings and get it going with this, or depending on what kind of fire starter you have. So I do keep that around. And then when I do canister stoves or alcohol stoves, I can actually use this to light that stove. Wouldn't even need a lighter in a pinch. So that is everything in the bag, and that's everything in the kit, right? Double check. Yeah, that's it. That's the whole shebang. And again, remember, when I go, I'll actually be kitted out like this. I'll have the water bottle holder right on there, but it's still pretty nondescript and low-key. They do have the Velcro on there too. If you want to personalize it with a little patch, you can, although we're trying to be low-key, right? So we'll go all black. Plus, those of you in the military know you can't just go walking around with any old pack, and this is designed with you guys in mind, this pack here. So it's either got to be camouflage that matches your uniform, or it's just got to be all black. And for either of those cases, no logos, no crazy insignias. You can't have a Nike swoosh, right? So that's why you'll notice there are no markings on this guy. In fact, now that I mention it, you'll notice they hid the GR1 designation and the GoRuck branding inside the pack for that very reason. For those of you in the military, just a little bonus for you. All right, so that, I believe, covers it. Now, optional items you could bring as well. Well, I often Because I record all the GPS data for my trips to share with people, I want something that does that pretty well and extensively, actually very well. So I carry a separate Garmin Oregon 650. I think they're up to the 750 model now, but that's that. And you could also carry a Spot Messenger, although if you're walking around with a Spot Messenger, you probably would look a little more like somebody who's going deeper in the woods, right? But these are nice. I do carry this, keep in contact with my wife. That depends on cell service though. And also for GPSs, nowadays there's a lot of cool apps. If you're not recording extensive data, you can probably get away with a cell phone. And then flashlights. I carry a flashlight like this, a pen light, or a little mini baton like that on my persons all the time. So that'll probably be with me, to be honest, because I just always carry it on my back pocket. I think, and I've done trips with just a headlamp, I think you'd be just fine with the system here with just a headlamp. Just make sure to bring extra batteries for it, of course, if it's your only light source, but a little redundancy isn't bad if you want. Yeah, that's it. That's everything. So there's my sub 9-pound stealth backpacking gear list. Anybody that has any suggestions, maybe thoughts on stealth camping, what you think stealth camping is, or suggestions on how to put together a better kit, I'd be more than welcome to hear those ideas in the comment section below. I always like a nice conversation. And that pretty much covers it, the stealth backpacking gear list. Till next time, I'm Syntax77, and you have fun out there.